Okay, good morning, everybody. Hazak Baruch, thank you for joining us. Today's class is sponsored anonymously for the Refuah Shlema of all of Israel. And this month's classes are also dedicated to Nishmat David ben Ne'ima by the Aharon family. Rabotai, please open up to the beginning of Perashat Beshalah. And the pasuk tells us that when the Jewish people left Egypt, Hashem had a choice which way to take us out. There was the long way and there was the short way. And take a guess, which way did God take us? Right? Of course, it wouldn't be fun if He took us the short way. So God took us the long way. Like pasuk says, second pasuk of our Perashat, Vayasev Elohim et ha'am derech hamidbar Yam Suf. And God took us through the midbar towards Yam Suf. Now, well, really, we have to go to the first pasuk. Vahi Beshalah Paro ta'am, when Paro sends the people, Velo naham Elohim derech eret Pelishtim. God did not allow us to go directly through the land of Pelishtim. If you know a map, if you look at a map where Egypt is, where Israel is, you go straight in from Pelishtim and you're in Israel. God says, nope, not taking you there. Why? Ki karovu, although it was closer. Ki amarlim, because God said, if we go straight into Israel from the south, the people are still new, they're still young, they're still slaves. They're going to come and they're going to see war. They're going to have to fight their first battle with the Canaanites. They're going to get scared. They're going to run. God says, I have to train them a little bit. It's like a kid. He comes from America. You don't put him straight in the army. He has to undergo a little bit of training. The Jews needed training before they came and encountered war, or else they would just chicken out. And therefore, He took them Derech HaMidbar Yam Suf. God takes them around the long way through the desert, and we know how that plays out. And now we have 40 years of material to talk about, or else the Torah would have been just very boring. Okay, everybody with me? So far, so good. Here is what today's class is going to be on. Pasuk 18, the second pasuk of our Perashah. God took them through the wilderness. Vahamushim alu b'nei Israel me'eretz Mizrahi. And today's class is going to be focused on this word, Vahamushim. What exactly, Rabotai, my friends, is the word Vahamushim? The people went up Vahamushim. So, of course, whenever we encounter a pasuk, whenever we have a question on what a pasuk means, who is the first person that we have to turn to? The first commentary? The father of commentaries, of course, is very good, Rashi. Let's see what Rashi has to say on this word, Vahamushim. The Jews came up Hamushim. In Hamushim, says Rashi, Ella Mezuyanim. You want to know what Hamushim means? It means armed. They came up with weapons. Because since they are now going to take the long way through the desert, instead of going straight into Israel, that's why Vahamushim alu b'nei Israel me'eretz Mizraim. That's why God had to take them up with weapons. Because if He took them straight through civilization, straight through regular territory, not through the desert, lo hayu mehumashim lahem. They wouldn't have to be so armed. Let me ask you guys a question. When you're traveling from New York to New Jersey and you're taking the highway, do you take with you your machine guns? You don't take your machine gun. You're going through regular highways. If you're traveling through the desert, then we take our weapons. We take our F-16s, right? But when you're going through civilization, you buy at every stop what you need. But if a guy's going through the desert, you got to take all the items with you from the place that you're leaving, right? If you're traveling to Israel, beautiful. You just take the clothes that you need. Everything else you can buy in Israel. If you're traveling to who knows where, to the middle of today, Baruch Hashem, you have Chabad. You can almost buy everything everywhere today. But if you're traveling to a place where there's no Chabad, although I can't think of one right now, maybe in Gaza, okay? If you're going to Gaza, then you need to take kosher food with you because you're not going to be able to buy kosher food over there, right? So this is what Rashi says. And therefore, and this pasuk is written here. Why is Torah telling us that they came up armed? Who cares? Does it matter? Armed with weapons, yes. No, armed with weapons. not silver and gold, not money, not food, armed with weapons. Okay? And why is Torah telling us that they had weapons? Shelot titma, you shouldn't wonder, b'milchemet Amalek, when we're going to fight Amalek at the end of this week's parasha, and when we're going to fight Sichon and Og and Midian, mehechan hayu lahem klei zayin. Where did they get all of the weapons from? Shehiku otam b'cherev. Where did the Jews have swords and bow and arrows? Since when? I thought they went into the desert with nothing except matzah. The answer is no. Look at the second pasuk of Beshalah. Vachamushim. The Jewish people leave armed. Very good. And by the way, do we have a proof of this? That the word hamushim means armed? Says Rashi 100%. All you got to do is open up to the book of Yehoshua. And what does it say? It says in Yehoshua, Ve'atem ta'abru hamushim. Joshua says to the Jewish people, as they're about to enter the land of Israel, this is the first chapter of Joshua. As they're about to enter the land of Israel and fight, Yehoshua says, Ve'atem ta'abru hamushim. He says this to the tribes of Reuven, Gad, and half of Menashe. Remember those 2.5 tribes that wanted to stay on the east side of the Jordan River? And they come and they make good to their promise. And Yehoshua says to them, remember what you promised? You're going to come and help us fight. And therefore, make sure you come armed. And we see over there the word hamushim is used. Okay? So, chamush, are you armed? So this is the first interpretation of Rashi. I think it's a very easy interpretation to understand. It fits with the flow. God took them the long way, and therefore they had to go up armed. So we see how the pasuk flows, cause and effect. Because they went through the desert, they now had to leave armed. Also, he brings another pasuk, and another proof. Onkelos is one of the earliest translations of the Torah. Today we have translation in English, we have French, you have any language you like. The first translation ever, I believe, maybe one of the first translation, well, it was, remember, translated into Greek, but one of the earliest translations was into Aramaic by Yonatan ben Uziel, and by Onkelos. And Rashi says, V'chen tirgemo Onkelos. Onkelos translates also the word Vahamushim in our pasuk, Mezarezin. They came up Zariz. Rashi, in Aramaic, Zariz means armed. Like we find by Avraham. When Avraham went to fight with 318 men, remember that? And some say it was just Eliezer. They went to fight the 4 kings, It says Vayarek. He armed his men. And Onkelos translates Vezariz. He armed his men. So you see Zariz, which means to arm, is used here by Onkelos. Okay? So we have Rashi, we have Onkelos, both of them who say that Chamushim means armed. Rabotai, I would like to share with you, however, another interpretation, and please turn to if you have it on whatever you're using, the Targum of Yerushalmi. Open to the Targum Yerushalmi and let's see what the Yerushalmi has to say. The Yerushalmi says something very interesting. The Yerushalmi says, and the word of the Lord conducted the people by the way of the desert of the sea of Suf. Okay, so far so good. God took us through the Yam Suf. Now let's see how he translates Vahamushim. You ready? Mezainin be'ovada tava. And they were armed, not with weapons, but be'ovada tava. What does that mean, be'ovada tava? That's Aramaic for good deeds. The Jewish people, says the Targum in Jerusalem, Targum Yerushalmi, the people went up from Mizrahi with good deeds. They had good deeds. They had mitzvot with them. Be'odava tava, with good deeds, seliku b'nei Yisrael. The Jewish people went up from Egypt. And now, my friends, Rabotai, we read this Yerushalmi, and we are scratching our heads. Which good deeds is he talking about? The Jewish people? Good deeds? Matter of fact, we know that we were on the lowest level of Tum'ah. God had to take us out so fast, because if we didn't leave then and there, we would have been stuck forever. I believe it's Rashi. If you take a look in chapter 12, Pasuk 6, When we're commanded on the blood, to put the blood on the doorpost of our homes. The pasuk says, "Ve'haya lachem lemishmeret." Keep the sheep there till the 14th. Ve'shahatu oto kol kehal adat Israel. And Rashi says over here, take a look. Why, of all places, we never have this idea of a korban that we have to keep it for 4 days? Why by Pesach, by Egypt, did we have to tie the sheep for 4 days to our beds? And Rashi answers, based on the pasuk, "Va'evor alayich, va'erech ve'hine itech et dodim." God says, the time came for the Jewish people to be redeemed. However, lo haya beyadam mitzvot. I'm reading Rashi, my friends. Lo haya beyadam mitzvot. They didn't have any mitzvot, no good deeds that they could do to merit their redemption. Says Rashi, God wanted to take us out, but He couldn't because we were naked. Like the pasuk says, Ve'at Aerom ve'eria. You are naked. You have no good deeds. You have no mitzvot. How am I going to take you out? And therefore, God gave them Menatan lahem shtei mitzvot. God gave us 2 commandments on the night of the Exodus. Anyone know which 2? Dam Pesach, blood of Pesach. The blood that we put on the doorpost. Vedam milah. And we also did a Brit Milah. The men did a Brit Milah. Shemalu be'oto halal. I don't know if you knew that. On the night of the Exodus, we did Brit Milah. And like the pasuk continues, I saw you in your bloods. 2 bloods. The blood of Brit Milah and the blood that we put on the doorpost. We say this, by the way, every time there's a Brit Milah. We say these psukim. And therefore, we were so low, we needed 2 mitzvot. So how could it be just last night we only had 2 mitzvot, the mitzvah of Pesach and the mitzvah of Milah, and all of a sudden, and by the way, FYI, parentheses, every positive commandment, if you don't do it, it's a sin, but it's not karet. There's only 2 commandments that if you don't do them, it's karet. And that is Korban Pesach, which we don't have today, and Brit Milah. Okay, so and it's not for now, but there's a very strong connection between these 2 and why they're so important that if a Jew fails to do these 2 mitzvot, then they warrant the worst sin, karet. We never get karet for positive commandments that we just failed to perform. But either way, how could it be that on the night that we leave, we're naked, we have no merit, we have no commandments, we have no mitzvot, and all of a sudden, the next day, Vachamushim, we leave Egypt armed with mitzvot. We're loaded. We are rich with good deeds. Be'ovada tava siliku. Like the Targum says, we left with all the good deeds. Which good deeds? I don't know we had good deeds. Good question. It's a very strong question if you ask me. We read a little bit further. And let's read what the Targum Yonatan ben Uziel says. Another Targum. Today we're doing a lot of Targum. The Targum of Yonatan ben Uziel, I believe he was a student of Hillel. And he says over here, take a look. What does it mean, Chamushim? They went armed. So far we have Rashi. Rashi makes sense. Rashi says armed with weapons. Good? Good. Now we just saw the first Targum, the Targum Yerushalmi, which made no sense. Because the Targum Yerushalmi seems to be saying that we had good deeds. And we ask, which good deeds? Now look at the Targum Yonatan, and he says, you know what it means, Chamushim? Chol had, everyone left, im hamsha taflin. Everyone left with 5 children. Whoa! So you know what Chamushim means over here? We left with 5 kids. And this again makes us wonder and scratch our heads. Because if you told me they left with 6 kids, that would make sense. I would say, and I would connect it right away to the other midrash that the Jewish people had multiplied, vayirbu, vayishretzu, vayirbu, vayatzmu, b'meod meod. And the Jewish people had how many kids at a time? Remember the midrash? The Jewish people had 6 children at a time. And therefore, if you told me everyone left with 6 kids, I'm a happy camper. That makes sense. But the Targum Yonatan says that they left with 5. And again, we are stuck. We are curious. We are confused. Okay? So we have to really put all of this together. And I would like to share with you today from the Be'er Yosef, Rav Yosef Tzvi Salant. And he answers everything. And he puts everybody together. And he says, the answer to all of this is actually the second interpretation of Rashi, which we didn't do yet. So Rashi first explained that Chamushim means armed. But let us, my friends, turn to the second interpretation of Rashi. And Rashi brings Davar Aher, another interpretation, quoting the Mechilta, a Midrash. What does it mean, Chamushim? Ehad mehamisha yatzu. Chamushim from the word 5, chamesh. Rashi says, only 1/5, echad mechamisha yatzu. Ve'arba'a halakim, because the other 4/5 metu b'shloshet yemei afila. Rashi says, connecting what he already told us on Makat Choshech. Rashi says over here that Chamushim means only 1/5 of the Jews left Egypt. Now that's a crazy idea because we know 3 million people left. So that means that around 12 million people died and never left Egypt. And if you were to ask, where did these 12 million Jews die? We never saw such a phenomenon. Turn please to Rashi on chapter 10, Pasuk 22. Rashi says over here, we're dealing over here with Makat Choshech. And the Pasuk tells us, Vayhi Choshech afela bechol eretz Mitzrayim sheloshet yamim. There was a darkness of 3 days. And Rashi tells us, there was 3 days that they couldn't see, and then a thicker darkness for another 3 days that they couldn't even move. And asks Rashi a beautiful question. Why did Hashem bring Makat Choshech on Egypt? What was the point of this plague? If you think about all of the plagues, they have a purpose. There's a punishment element. But just darkness to not move, I don't know. Is that like the craziest Makkah? I feel like every Makkah is really escalating. They run out of food, right? And all of a sudden, it's like, all right, Choshech. You could have done better though, I think, God, if you ask me. If you ask me, me personally, Choshech, start with Choshech. It's pretty cool. You know, you dim the lights and then you rock Egypt. But that it should be the 9th plague. If we had to rate the plagues from lightest to strongest, yes, the last one is definitely the strongest, Bechorot. But the 9th, the plague of darkness, I don't know about that one. I think there are much harder ones than darkness. Yeah? The wild animals. Lama hevi choshech, asks Rashi. Answers Rashi, Shehayu beYisrael, watch this. Because there were Jews, unfortunately, be'oto hador, in that generation, Reshaim, velo hayu ratzim laseh, they didn't want to leave. Umetu b'shloshet yemei afela. And therefore, all of these Jews that didn't want to leave, can you imagine? They were slaves, but they didn't want to leave. They were so sucked into the culture of Mizrahi. I'm reminded of the line from the Shawshank Redemption when Red says to Andy, these walls are funny. First, you hate them, then you get used to them. Enough time passes, you depend on them. Yeah, so this is really what happened to the Jews. 4/5 did not want to leave, says Rashi, because they got so used to Mizraim. There's something comfortable about familiarity. We like knowing, even though it's simple. Sometimes moving, even though you tell someone you'll make more money if you move to this new place. But there's the unknown, there's the fear of the unknown. And the Jews didn't want to go out, even though it was freedom. But here I know what I'm getting. I know what it is, right? I know. It's hard to be a pioneer. It's hard to take that first step. And therefore, God says, I have to kill these 4/5 that don't merit to leave. But in order that the Egyptians shouldn't see these Jews die, because then they'll say, oh, look, you see, it's not just Mizraim that's getting killed. Look, the Jews are also getting killed. Hashem had to prevent that. Ve'od, and also, so that's number one. God brought darkness so that the Egyptians shouldn't see the Jews dying. And God killed 4/5 of the Jews in Makat Choshech. And the second interpretation is during the darkness, the Jews searched during in the houses of homes of the Egyptians, and they were able to see where they were hiding their gold and silver. But what comes out of all of this, Rashi is telling us that Makat Choshech is when 4/5 of the Jews died. And if that's the case, if 4/5 of the Jews died, says the Be'er Yosef, let us do a very simple mathematical equation. If 4/5 of the males died, and it's not everyone that died, it's only the adults, the fathers, the ones that we could hold responsible for their choice. But what about those 4/5 children? Whatever happened to them? No mistake, they for sure didn't die in Choshech. It wouldn't be fair to kill the children of those wicked people, of the 4/5. What happened to those children? Says the Be'er Yosef, combining all of the different ideas. Ha'arba'a halakim, the 4/5 of children who were good, innocent. You know what happened to them? They went out with the 1/5 that left. And every father had to now adopt 4/5 of Am Yisrael. And therefore, if you add their own 5th that they own, and the 4 new 5ths, says the Be'er Yosef, Vachamushim. That's what the Targum means when he says everyone left with 5 children. It means they left with their own 5th, and the 4/5 that died. Unbelievable. And this is the Ovadat Avad. These are the good deeds of the Jewish people. And I'm going to read to you the words of the Be'er Yosef. It comes out. We have another question. Why is Torah telling us here that the Jewish people went out with 4/5? This should have been told to us last week. We already read last week that the Jewish people left. Last week you should have added, by the way, when we left with 4 chamushim, we left armed, or with 5. Why is Torah telling this to us here? Ela, but the Torah is teaching us over here. It's to only publicize the righteousness of the Jews as we were leaving, because it's the way of the world. You know, sometimes people will adopt children for a day, for a week. You have different organizations that parents want to help orphans, people want to help children with disabilities, so they take them for a few hours, they give parents a break, right? Someone actually on this chat reached out to me recently, and they wanted to help a mother that was having difficulty with one of her children who was maybe not so well, and she treated her to a night in the city and dinner, and it was a beautiful thing, and paying for a babysitter, like a special type of babysitter, was beautiful. And there are people that are amazing like this in our community. God bless them. And we want to help. You want to help, you help for a day. You go on winter vacation, your friend can't afford it, so you take their kid for a week. But here it says the Be'er Yosef, the Jewish people are going into the desert for who knows how long. It could be years and years and years. They don't know where they're going. Now you're going to adopt a family? You're going to adopt 4 families. And this is the righteousness of the Jewish people. And therefore the Torah, according to the Be'er Yosef, let's read the whole pasuk. Vayasev Elohim et ha'am. God took the Jews the long way. They went through the deserts. It was a place that we didn't know. And still, Vachamushim alu b'nei Israel, and we still were willing to adopt 4/5 of the Jewish people. 4/5 of the children who died. Hainu sherak chelek echad mehamisha yatzu. The 1/5 that left were willing to take the children of those that didn't leave. And this is a tremendous act of chesed. This is a tremendous act of kindness. And this is the chamushim. And by the way, says the Be'er Yosef, if you ask me, when the Torah says in Yirmiyahu, V'zacharti lach chesed ne'urayich, I will always remember, God says to the Jews, the kindness of your youth. Which kindness of our youth is the Torah referring to? Many people say the fact that we were willing to follow Hashem into the Midbar, into an uninhabited place. But it's not really such an act of kindness that you followed God. What was the alternative? Egypt. Hazaku Baruch. You want to be a slave and get killed and have your babies put in bricks? Of course you follow God into the desert. So says the Beit Yosef, according to me, the chesed that we did was not that we followed God, but that we followed God and we took all those extra children under our wing that we didn't have to. Wow. This is, my friends, such an amazing idea. And with this, the Beit Yosef explains and he puts it all together. By the way, there is a sefer called Mishnah Halachot. And Mishneh Halachot, we know that on Pesach, we have on the Leil HaSeder 4 cups of wine. And the question is, why 4 cups of wine? So some say, corresponding to the 4 expressions of freedom. The Arba'a Leshonot Geula. Do we know them by heart? Right? We had to memorize it in school when I was a kid. Vehotzeti, vehitzalti, vega'alti, velakachti, right? There are 4 different steps of redemption. And to correspond to each one, we had 4 cups of wine. There is another interpretation that the reason we have 4 cups of wine is because the dream of Yosef and the butler. If you count over there, it says the word kos 4 times. It says the word cup 4 times. And we wonder what connection between the cups of Yosef and the dream to the four cups that we have on Pesach. And the Maharal says, because whatever happens to Yosef is a paradigm, is an example of what's going to happen to the Jewish people. If his Geulah began with cups in a dream, then so too our Geulah will begin with the cups in a dream. So that's how the Maharal explains it. But there is something maybe a little bit deeper, and that is that how did Yosef know that the butler is going to be the one to be freed and the baker is going to be the one who's going to get killed? What was it that gave it away? And there are many answers to this question, but one of the ideas I saw one time, so beautiful, is that the butler Yosef saw, what does the butler do in his dream? What does he do when he's freed? When he's freed, he goes back to work for Paro. He goes back to serving. What does the baker do when he's freed? He leaves. He goes out to the field somewhere. He goes to hang out. And therefore, Yosef knew that a life of meaning and purpose is one that we serve, one that we do. If one's going to spend their entire lives out in the field, out vacationing, out doing nothing, that's a life that's empty. There's no way that's a meaningful life. And therefore, Yosef is able to conclude that the baker who is just hanging out doing zero, that's not productive, that's not a way to live, that's going to lead to death. And the butler who is working, who is serving, who is doing. And that is actually a beautiful message. On our night of Pesach, we take the 4 cups to remember the 4 cups and we ask ourselves, what do we want with our freedom? What do we want with our free time? Why do we want to be freed? Freedom, we learn from the butler, means to commit ourselves to a life of avadim to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So these are the classic interpretations, but the Mishneh Halachot says something very, very beautiful. He says, we know wine, really, on the one hand, it gladdens the heart, but right away it also makes someone sad. The Pasuk says, Tenu yayin lemarei nefesh. Wine is given to people that are bitter. Wine is given to mourners. And says the Mishneh Halachot, if that's the case, maybe the 4 cups that we have on Pesach is not a sign of redemption, but it's a drinking of mourning. And why 4? Because we are mourning the 4/5 of Jews that remained outside, that never left Egypt. Wow. And part of the drinking, as happy as we are, we have to always remember to mourn and to cry for our brothers that didn't want to leave. Our brothers and sisters that died in Eretz Mizrahi. And again, great courage is needed in life to step into the unknown. That's maybe why the Jews, and even after we did leave, we find that the Jews keep repeating and saying, we wish we never left. So even the 1/5 that left, they're complaining many times in our parasha, and then we're going to read a book again in the book of Numbers. They keep complaining, oh, if only we would have stayed, life was so good. Because courage, like Martin Luther King Jr. taught us, is the power of the mind to overcome fear. And sometimes in life when we have fear of the unknown, we need the courage. In the words of Rabbi Nachman, Ve'ha'ikar. And the main thing, lo lefached klal. So sometimes life requires the courage to be able to make that first step, to be able to take that first step of courage. You don't have to see the whole staircase, but you just have to take the first step. And sometimes it's scary to go out on a date. We don't know what it's going to be like. It's scary to maybe start a new company. It's scary to move to a new community. It's scary to put our kids in this new school. I'd rather just go the safe route. It's known. Everyone puts their kids there. It's true. It's safer. Maybe it's easier. But we sometimes need the courage in life to ask ourselves, maybe there's something that's greater out there. And this is what we learned from the 1/5 of the Jews that left. And we also learn the tremendous acts of kindness that they did. And this explains to us, finally circling back, the chamushim. What does it mean, chamushim? So, chamush from the word 5. Everyone left with 5 kids. How 5 kids? Not 5 kids, but they left with 5 portions, 5/5. Their own 5th and an extra 4/5. Everybody took upon themselves, under their wing, all of these yetomim. And this is the chesed of the Jewish people. Ashrehem Israel. Unbelievable. Look at the Be'er Yosef really tying all of these amazing ideas together. Either way, we'll stop over here, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day. God willing, we'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.